Hello and welcome back to Wrapped Cinema. In this episode, we continue looking at the Maze Runner series. So, if you haven't watched the first part, please check it out. Before we watch what happens to the group after they experience life outside the maze, make sure to sit back, relax and grab some sun lotion. After escaping from the maze, Thomas, Newt, Minnow, Teresa, Agnes, Frypan and Winston are welcomed by Mr. Jansen into a protected facility. They meet other survivors from other mazes, and they learn that every day, a group of teenagers is summoned to be lodged in farms and communities in safe areas. However, Thomas decides to investigate what happens with the teenagers and he meets Aris Jones. Thomas and Aris crawl through the facility vents. As they are exploring, Thomas looks into a hallway where he sees staff moving one of the gladers into a secured room. Suspicious, Thomas tries to investigate but is swiftly stopped by the guards just before Jansen enters and quells the riot caused by Minnow, Thomas, Newt and the others. The group is then thrown into their room, but Thomas reveals he stole a keycard from the guard and immediately after Aris comes through the vent. Aris and Thomas carefully go back to the room and open the door. They find a collection of grievers which seems extremely strange and even worse gladers who are hooked up to tubes and machinery. Yikes. The boys don't have long to investigate before Jansen enters the room. Jansen starts to call Dr. Page, which is quite surprising given the first movie. We learn the facility holding them is actually owned by Wicked and not a resistance group. It's clear from the call they are harvesting gladers for their blood so they can use it in experiments for a cure. We find out that Wicked facilities are being hit hard by the right arm, the most prominent of the resistance groups who are desperate to get a hold of immunities. Armed with this knowledge, you see what I did there? Thomas and the group begin to barricade their door and one by one, each glader escapes into the vent system. As they roam the facility, they take a doctor hostage and Minnow does this sick AF slide into a guard and grabs a launcher. They take some more staff hostage and find Teresa. The group find the exit and start sprinting for the closing door. Luckily Thomas just manages to slide underneath before it closes, and they escape into the wild desert. As Wicked guards comb the nearby area, Teresa spots an abandoned building and the group dive inside to avoid being spotted. Away from any danger for now, Thomas beings to elaborate on what he heard Wicked saying. They devise a plan to go out and find the right arm. The group begin to explore the building and find a power generator. They come across several seemingly dead bodies before reaching it and turning it on, but not long before it is activated, they are attacked by cranks. Minnow and Thomas barricade the door with a filing cabinet, but it is no use for several more appear, nearly surrounding them. Minnow and Thomas meet up with the now terrified other gladers and they all sprint up an abandoned escalator. They leg it down a long corridor and right as they pull away some adjacent glass shatters and a crank dives through onto Newt. Thomas proper Spartan kicks the crank and not long after the group come across a locked door. Winston tries to hold the cranks off while the group get the door open. Just as they manage to brute force their way in, the cranks get a hold of Winston and start clawing at his skin. However, the group manage to pry him away and hide beneath some rubble. The group walk through an abandoned city and dodge the Bergs trying to hunt them down. However, it's clear that Winston has been heavily wounded and stumbles to the floor. They carry him with them as they leave the city and enter the vast desert. They see a cargo boat in the distance and decide to gun towards it. We find out that Teresa undergone some surgery courtesy of Wicked and that she remembers the past. She starts to get angry towards Thomas and says they should go back. Before Thomas can respond, Winston tries to grab Frypan's gun and manages to shoot it. We learn Winston has been infected by the flare and that he can no longer walk. The group have no option but to let him say his goodbyes before Newt gives him the gun. They hear a single shot ring out in the distance. The group reaches the cargo ship by night and rest, contemplating how the death of Winston implies they may not be immune either. Days go by, eventually the group leave the desert and see mountains in the distance. A few nights later the group come across an old factory which seems to have power. However, a heavy thunderstorm develops right behind them and so they bolt to the newfound civilization. In their attempt to escape the harsh weather, a stray bolt of lightning strikes Minnow, knocking him out. They manage to drag him into shelter and get him to come round. Thomas and Co. then meet Brenda, who takes them to see Jorge, the leader of the mercenaries. Jorge is suspicious since nobody came out of the desert in so long. He orders his guards to tackle the group to the floor and they scan his neck, revealing he too has the same tattoo that Teresa does. Finding out the group escaped, Jorge ties the group up. We learn the rest of the mercenaries want to sell them back to Wicked, but Jorge seems to have other plans. Alone, the group work together to escape, using the momentum of one another to swing Teresa to the edge of the pit and flick the lever. However, whilst they are doing this, some sick AF Wicked Spec Ops team storms the building and starts taking out guards. Jansen announces Wicked stormed the compound and mutiny breaks out, as one of the guards tries to recapture the Gladers and bring them to Wicked. Suddenly, Brenda storms in and one taps him, and the group try to escape by zipline. However, Brenda and Thomas get separated. As both groups escape the complex, Jorge presses a detonator and blows the factory to pieces. We then take the perspective of Brenda and Thomas, who encounter cranks in an underground tunnel. They see light at the end of the tunnel and emerge into a dilapidated skyscraper. They try desperately to escape the ensuing cranks by climbing up the stairwell. They get a good lead on them, but Brenda trips and falls down to a window of the collapsed structure. The last crank falls on her, and just before Thomas breaks up the scuffle, the crank bites Brenda. The window shatters and the crank falls to its death, but Thomas just manages to grab Brenda. They descend the building and find a man named Marcus, who Brenda was looking for. Marcus hides his identity and claims his friends came by and they're inside his club. Instead of giving them information on the right arm, Marcus spikes them and it's clear they've entered his messed up cult. Thomas and Brenda both trip out and they end up making out. Nice. Miraculously, as he passes out, the other Gladers find him. When they wake up, we see Jorge interrogating Marcus. They learn the right arm have an outpost in the mountains and steal Marcus's pimped out ride, Bertha. They all bundle in and travel on road to meet the right arm, but not as they ascend. They are forced out of the car by a roadblock. Suddenly, Thomas spots a bullet hole and band of snipers start to take shots at the group. As Jorge tries to cause a distraction, they are cornered by two snipers, but it's not long before they recognize Aris. It's clear they were a part of his maze, and they take the group to the right arm leader, Vince. As they talk with Vince, Brenda starts to have difficulty breathing and collapses. Vince pulls up her trouser leg and sees a bite and without hesitation, pulls out his gun. Thomas intervenes and begs them to keep her alive, but Vince is not dissuaded and cocks his gun. However, just in time the camp doctor steps in and confronts Thomas and Vince. She hints at knowing Thomas before he lost his memory, and Vince finds out Thomas was the source of nearly all the intel they had on Wicked. The doctor takes a sample of Thomas's blood and creates an enzyme concoction which uses his immunity as a temporary method to slow the infection. Brenda comes round and they talk about their families. Brenda mentions how when she was younger their family went to a Wicked camp, but they kicked them all out except her brother who was immune, losing her mum to the flare shortly after. Thomas mentions the death of Chuck and they bond over surviving such terrible experiences. That night, Thomas and Teresa speak. We learn Teresa lost her mum to the flare in such a terrible way and how she couldn't give up searching for a cure. Confused, Thomas asks what's going on, but before she answers we see helicopters converging on the camp. Thomas tries to warn the others but is too late. Jansen lays waste to the camp whilst Thomas desperately tries to find his friends. We see his friends rally around a truck and take point, attempting to pick off any attacking Wicked soldiers. Instead, Thomas finds Brenda and Jorge who hid behind some barrels. Thomas reaches them just in time to see this Wicked guard get the sickest multi-stun you've even seen. It's obvious if the fight were any longer, he'd be calling in his own killstreak helicopter by now. The guards start tallying the immunis they've recaptured as they search for Thomas. He gives himself up after seeing all of his friends are captured. Not soon after, Paige shows up in a burg and it's confirmed that Teresa has been working with Wicked the whole time. The camp doctor confronts Dr. Paige and lambasts her on her inhumane methods to develop a cure. Jansen responds by shooting her in the chest. Angered, Thomas reveals the bomb Jorge gave him. Right before Thomas detonates the bomb, Jorge charges the camp with a stolen jeep and crashes into a Wicked helicopter causing chaos. The Gladers take advantage and begin to break free of captivity. Thomas throws the bomb at a group of guards before being tackled to the ground by Jansen. He is almost shot, but Brenda saves the day. Being the badass he is, Vince takes the command on the gun on the truck and lays the Wicked guards to waste. However, in the commotion, Mino gets hit by a stray launcher shot and is momentarily paralyzed. Knowing the fight is lost, the movie ends with Paige and the remaining guards grabbing Mino and leaving on the burg.
Hi. We have to stop meeting like this.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and make sure to turn on notifications to get the latest Wrapped Cinema updates. Stay tuned to find what happens in the final Maze Runner movie.